Whenever you're ready.
University press. And we're even more fortunate that our world-class university press is actually interested in coming and speaking to us about the process of an academic book. And that's an unusual resource that I certainly recommend in my so Lisa Benny is an editor at the press. Several lists that I know are what your other areas are. So, Lisa Benny.
Published in a lot of different areas like social media, communication, sociology, anthropology, so a lot of the humanities and social sciences. And then we also publish a lot of books on New Jersey and the tri-state region. Some of those are scholarly, like Scarlet and Black, which might have Rutgers history with indigenous and African people. And then we publish some that are more fun, treaty kind of books, like Day Trips to New Jersey or Walking Towards Harlem. Okay, so if you want to publish a book, the first thing to understand is that there are different types of publishers and different types of publishers. So the different types of publishers. First, we're going to be talking about publishers like Gibson, so if you're publishing, if you want to publish like a 101 book for your class, this would be the kind of publisher that you approach. And usually that's their specialty. They're publishing mainly those kinds of books, and they're going to take other books through adoption. And then in academic press, we publish some textbooks that are usually more advanced level, so not necessarily your 101 course, but your upper level courses. And then they will also publish scholarly books, monographs, and volumes and journals as well. So that's going to be particular privilege, Wiley, Palgrave. And so there would be different areas, libraries, and graduate level options. And then there's university press, which is what we are. And so they're surprisingly going to be associated with college or university. A lot of different schools have them. You might be friends from them. So I just near Rutgers, Princeton. There's a ton of other ones. Education, Johns Hopkins, and SUNY are two bigger ones. There's other ones as well. So usually a university press publishes primarily scholarly monographs. Not so much a big textbook for your 101 class or your upper level, but there are some maybe people sections. And then sometimes the university press will publish journals as well. We don't publish any, but they're quite unique at the university press. So they're more primarily going to help libraries and individual scholars, but there may be some advanced level if the topic calls for that. And then for the types of books, so kind of going along with the publishers, there's textbooks for your lower level and advanced. Scholarly volumes, research case study are kind of similar. Case study would be like if you're studying a particular university, research university to apply research to over the data set. Theory, like if you're writing a film book and you're applying a bunch of different theorists to get Stanley Kubrick film, that category. Then edited anthologies and edited bodies. So anthologies generally are when you're publishing mostly previously published work. Those are increasingly rare, at least at our press, just because almost everything is able to be found online now, whether that's legally or illegally. So if you can find it somewhere online for free, people are probably going to go to that instead of finding new books. Edited volumes are going to be mostly new scholarship, but it's going to be from different scholars on a similar theme. And books, usually large books that are the best and most cutting edge work at a field level. So here are some recent textbooks from our education list. And so I want to show you a variety of different kinds of books. So the ones on the top are more trade books. So either they have a larger or more general audience that are typical books, and then on the bottom are photo books. So start with the ones on the bottom. One on the left, that's a more theory heavy book. So the two of them are looking at partner schools. So when colleges, with goals, but they theorize it going all the way back to Socrates and why is this a good partnership? What do we want to do with that? So even though it does have a practical application, the book is very theory heavy. Middle book, like on campus, that was research heavy book. We went and spoke to like campuses and talked to them about their perceptions of racism and what they thought about their role in with racism. And then on the right, that would be an example of tentative volume. So it's mostly new scholarship, and it's about how indigenous peoples are generally underrepresented in higher education research because they're such a generally small percentage of the population. They tend to be overlooked or not included at all. So looking at why is that problem, what can we do? But so all different people talking about this, and then the editor group it around the common theme and have an introduction to frame that. So the top is more they're scholarly in their own way, but they're a larger audience. So on the left, so that one, the 33 civil strategies for faculty, that is still going to appeal to scholars, but it's not our typical book because it's very short chapters. Each one deals with only 6 chapters a semester. It's just like how can you make first year or first generation students feel welcome in classroom. So it's not looking at here's the previous research or like very theory heavy. It's just like, hey, maybe week 1 you should talk about resources on your campus. So it's very practical and it could be used by people in all kinds of disciplines. So it's not just for education. Maybe this is a college curriculum. That's more general because the author was one of the authors of Steve was a very big name in education, and we've published other books from him previously. They've tended to sell well, so we thought previous books that sold well, latest books as well. And it makes use of a lot of interviews with professors, and because of the more storytelling nature, it might have a larger audience than books that are more because of the century. Books that are on specific institutions, there's going to be hopefully an audience of people who went to the institution or worked there or are interested in it. So it's going to be a different audience than some of our other so when you decide you want to publish a book, there's something that you need to think about. The first thing is what you want to write about. And so hopefully you know or have an idea of that. If you're turning your dissertation into a book, you might want to think about, do I want to essentially do exactly the same topic? Do I want to narrow in on part of it? Do I want to make it broader? You want to think about if it really should be exactly the same or if there's something that you should be doing. How much time can you commit to a project? So this is something that a lot of people don't think about, and it's not that there's a specific amount of time you should be, it's just that it's important to have kind of a general idea. So at least at our class, we're generally pretty flexible with how long you're going to take, but it's really important for me to know a realistic goal that you have. So if you say, I'm going to take a couple years to write the whole book, that's fine. But if you tell me I'm going to take 6 months and then every 6 months we check in and it just keeps getting pushed out, that's more frustrating on my end because we try to plan around that. So if plans are changing, that's harder to do. And so also just remember to keep in mind for teaching classes, that goal, can you apply for course release? Try to be realistic about what you have to do. What other books have been written on the subject? So we published a book about students who are parents, and then somebody made a proposal to me about mothers, students who are mothers. And so, obviously the general topic we're interested in, since we published something similar, but to me, the proposal didn't really say how it was different. It seemed really similar. I was like, well, we don't want 2 books on the exact same topic because they're going to compete with each other. So even if your book is similar to other books in the field, you want to make sure that you have something that makes it going to find this book? So that's about, are you writing for your 101 students? Are you writing for graduate students? Are you writing for other people who are researching? Or maybe you're writing for general trade, you just want like, and so that's going to affect how you write the book, how you write the proposal. If you're writing for a 101 or general audience, you're probably going to need to include a lot more background, a lot, kind of break it down more, not use as much jargon. Or if you're writing for a graduate student, you can kind of assume some level of understanding. So when you figure out those questions, the first thing you want to do is write an effective book proposal. So the things that you're going to want to include in that are what is the manuscript about. And so remember that an editor is not necessarily an expert in the field. I don't have a PhD in education because, like I said before, I have hired in 4 areas. For PhD, I can do. So you want to talk about what it's about, but make sure that it catches their interest. Make sure that it's accessible to somebody who's going to be familiar from acquiring, but might not be an expert. So, like I said before, what makes it unique? Why is it important? So, to go back to the book about students who are parents, they said, you know, that's an increasing percentage of the student population. So, this is something that colleges are going to have to deal with increasingly going forward. So, that's why it's important. That's why people are going to want to learn about it. Who should read it? So, again, that's talking about the audience, upper or lower level students, general readers. That's especially important if you're not submitting the full manuscript, if you're submitting sample materials. It's good for me to have an idea of what you have in mind. See if your writing style matches that. I can direct you on how to fix things if it doesn't match that. And then it's also helpful for me when I'm presenting it to the rest of the press and we're coming towards initial plans. We can say, we need to know about this many, this is where we should be marketing it. That's something that we need to know so we can come up with. Why should the press publish it? So this is talking about why it's important and why should that specific press publish it. So like sometimes people will call us and say, you should publish my book on Shakespeare. And we the best Shakespeare book that I read it, but we don't publish on Shakespeare. So why would you come to us? And that's for your benefit, because if we don't publish on Shakespeare, then we don't go to the conferences where people are presenting that information. We're not marketing to the right people. We don't have this kind of email list. We don't have this kind of contact. So if you really want to go to a press that's doing those things, that's going to the conferences you go to, that you've seen their ads in journals or programs that you've been hearing about, you have those books on your shelf because you know that they're going to be reaching the audience that you want to reach. How does it fit with the press list? So we do publish education, but you know there might be some books that I'm like, well, it's education, but it doesn't really fit most of the rest of what we've been publishing. Just because I only have so much time, some books are really great and they're education focused, but we just can't publish everything in the field. So you're going to look for a press that publishes general areas. Like we have a lot of books about diversity of education. So if some people if want to publish in that area, they're going to want to approach us. There are other presses that focus on other areas and might want to. When you're developing your writing and materials, these are some books to help you get started. These are recommended by our editorial director. Build your knowledge in this area, about him. So how do you figure out which publishers to approach? So the first one is to look at books on your shelf. If you're reading those books, there's a good chance that they're going to be publishing in areas that you're interested in. Look at publisher samples at conferences. So I'm going to the History of Ed conference in a couple weeks. So if you're there, you can look at what other publishers are there. You can look at the actual physical books. Are they, do the covers look nice? Does the inside of the book look nice? Is that something that you want your book to look like? What kind of marketing materials do publishers have? Do you think that we market their books well? And just the simple fact of a publisher being there or not is important too. And then talk to friends and colleagues. So either they can tell you, this is a big publisher in our field, it would look great if you publish with them, or they could just say, oh, I worked with this person, they have a really great reputation, or I had a good experience, or I didn't have a good experience. And it's also fine if you know somebody who's published with a press to get them to reach out to the editor on your behalf. I have several manuscripts out for review that were recommended by somebody that already published with. presses. We have an association called the Association of University Presses, and every year they come out with like this grid that lists all the university presses and a bunch of different subject areas. But when you really just don't know where to start, you can just look at all the presses that publish in a certain area and kind of narrow things. So once you have decided which publisher or publishers you want to approach, how do you do that? So first you want to assemble some materials. Sometimes people will just say to me, are you interested on a book in, about diversity in education? And like, generally, yes, but it really helps to see like something more specific, actual writing sample. And then also I'd like to have time to research things myself, see what else is out there, what other people are publishing. So it's good to have something that I can actually look at and dive into. So you want to have a proposal, your CV, and then hopefully a couple sample chapters. Our press generally likes to see 2 sample chapters, but other presses may be different, so usually check the website to see what the minimum is. And then you're going to want to make contact with an acquisitions editor specifically. Sometimes at presses people would say, oh, like developmental editor, but that's a different job. So acquisitions editor is the person in charge of signing up the book for the press. And so, disciplines, try to send your proposal to the person who covers your discipline, although it's not that big deal if you don't respond to it. And it's also fine, sometimes people, like somebody will send a proposal to me and the women's and gender studies editor and say, just make sure you tell them I'm sending this to both of you. I'm not sure which area would be a better fit, but just let me know and then we can talk about it between the two of us and see what. And so where do you find them? Can be found at conferences or on campus. So that's in person. So conferences, like I said, I'm going to the District Ed conference, I'm going to ASH, I go to AURA, and then some other conferences for my other fields. And you can always feel free if you see that the press is going to be there, because usually the association will put out an exhibitors list. You can reach out to the editor and say, hey, are you going to be there? Do you have some time to talk? I have an idea for books. That's totally fine. Even if I don't have time because my schedule is full, then I can sometimes have a phone call or some other way that we can be in touch. On campus refers to campus visits. So sometimes, like if an editor is going to a conference in Minneapolis, they might decide to go to a college that's there too and just talk to some people about what they're working on, or if they are interested in publishing specific projects. So if you hear about that, you can always feel free again to be in touch with that editor and say, here you're going to be on campus. If you're really interested in talking with you, and then obviously they're usually available electronically as well. So feel free to reach out via email. You can call them on the phone, although email will be and then make sure that you actually usually electronically access. Most presses, I think, except and want email materials now. There might be a couple outliers in the number of materials. If that's the case, it should say on the website what they would like. So following up with the editor. So don't be afraid to ask stupid or naive questions, especially if you're a first-time author. We expect that, and I would rather you ask and find out the actual answer than just kind of assume things and then you have issues later that need to be fixed. And I've heard a lot of questions before. People will say, "I'm so sorry, I'm asking this." Fine, everybody has it. But also let the editor ask questions. So sometimes, especially if this happens on the phone, people give you a call and they'll talk for 20 minutes and then they'll hang up. But I haven't had a chance to ask any of my questions, so I'd like to know, like, what makes it so different. You haven't explained that to me, or one specific question about your material. And if you don't give me a chance to ask that, then I'm less likely to want to find your book or even send it out for review. So make sure just to say, do you have any questions or anything else I can let you know. And then if you call somebody, especially if it's an unscheduled call, don't expect a definitive answer. Like I said, I do usually like to look into things a little more. So if you send me a proposal, that gives me a chance to, maybe look at what we have in the pipeline, look at what other presses are publishing. I like to do a little bit of research once I have your proposal. So if it's on a phone call, I don't necessarily have the time to do that. And probably not going to be able to do a definitive yes or no. Don't be afraid of a rejection. It's not personal. It's not a reflection of you. So sometimes it's just a list, like I said before, it could be the best Shakespeare book ever, but we don't know Shakespeare. Or maybe similar books before and they didn't perform as well as we wanted. So even though your book sounds really interesting, you know, we have, even though we're a nonprofit, we do need to and too similar or different. So if we too similar, we don't want our books competing with each other, or too different that, you know, we only have so much time and resources. We want to dedicate it to books that fit in a certain field so that we can make sure that we're maximizing those. So usually for a university press, they're going to send your manuscript out for review. Might have experienced that with journal articles already. So again, this is not a personal reflection on you. Sometimes things personally, but it's the constructive part of every book development. It's a good thing because everybody wants your book to be the best it can be. So take the criticism in the spirit that was meant to help be helpful. Review periods can vary. It could be a few weeks, it could be 6 months or more. Honestly, the hardest part for me is just finding these reviewers nowadays, just because people are so busy and so overloaded that people just don't have time. So don't be afraid to ask your editor, like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a few weeks. What's going on? They say, oh, sorry, I'm just having trouble finding people, or the person that I found is late. Hopefully they keep you updated, but if they don't, you can always reach out. And so when you do get the reports, you want to consider feedback relates to what you want to accomplish. So a lot of presses won't necessarily ask you to just do everything that the reviewer has said, but if you don't agree with the criticism, you should be able to explain why. Hopefully you can also acknowledge it in the some way. So if they're saying, well, I really think that you should talk about whatever, and you say, well, that's not part of the scope of my project, but I'll make that clear from the beginning by saying we only got US history, not world history or whatever. Or you can, you know, provide more sources that, you know, if they want somebody to talk about this, you say, well, if you need further reading, here's that. Or just kind of rebut it in some way in the text so that you don't necessarily have to incorporate everything, but we want to know that you've considered things and actually taken the feedback seriously. And so usually once you get the reports, the next step on the press side will be for you to respond to the reviews, and then I take the response, the reports, and whatever parts of the manuscript we have, I take it to our internal committee. So at our press, that's our editors, our press director, and our marketing department. And we all talk about, do we want to offer a contract? What should the terms of the contract be? That's where we would offer a contract. And so there is also an editorial board. That's one of the things that the university press part as well. Academic press or textbook publisher would not have that. And it comes at different stages of the process for different. So our editorial committee generally sees the manuscript after all the reviews are in, which can be after the contract is signed sometimes. Some presses, you have to go to the editorial board before the contract is signed. And so that is a committee of 10 faculty members. So Ben is actually the chair of our board. So we try to get people, like Ben is in education, but then there are other people from other areas that align with what we publish. And so they have to approve everything that we publish. So once the press decides to offer you a contract, there are some things that you should look for. So most publishing contracts at a university press are going to be pretty standard. Just they standard at that press. So most presses use the same language for most of their contracts. So it's not going to be, you know, if you and your friend publish on the same publisher, you're probably going to have pretty similar terms. But you want to make sure to look out for who owns publishing rights and copyright. So if something is really important to you, you can ask about it. Like if you really want your book to come out in Spanish, you can ask the press about that. Do they have plans for that? Do they have contacts for doing that? Or if you happen to have contacts at a Spanish language publisher, you can say, can I retain the rights so that I can pursue that on my own. And the press should be willing to talk to you about, you know, what makes sense for your book in particular. You want to pay attention to the delivery date, what the responsibilities are. Are you delivering the manuscript? Are you delivering images, commissions, everything? And so like I said before, usually a press can be flexible to a point. It's important though that you be realistic. So if delivery date just doesn't make sense, please just say that up front and then we can figure things out. And then after you sign the contract, if you know that you aren't going to hit the delivery date, press, usually when we say length, it's in words. So if you're approaching me about a project, it's important that you tell me how long you think the project will be in words. Just because pages, people always tell me pages, but if you have different fonts or different spacing, whatever, that can all be different. And so our account usually includes all aspects of the user except for the index. Just because the index comes pretty late in the process. It's one of the last things that you do before the book is actually published. So it's hard to include that in the Word account. But it includes everything else like notes, bibliography, captions, front matter, acknowledgements. So make sure when you're telling your publisher what you expect, how long you expect the book to be, that you're including all of that. And when you see it in the contract, how long they expect the book to be, how many images they expect it to be, just make sure that all seems reasonable to you. Royalty, so that is how much money you get for the book sell, and that could be, it's usually nowadays net, so that means that you get a percentage based on net profit. They're usually pretty low, honestly, nowadays. Especially surprised, the royalties are very low / non-existent. At our price, usually the highest royalties are on ebooks. And honestly, the royalties for hardcover are usually 0 or very low, just because nowadays it's mostly libraries buying the hardcover, and it's very low numbers. So we've seen those sales decreasing over time. So you can expect that. Something else to watch out for, you may be responsible for commission fees. So just something to keep in mind, make sure you have a budget for that, either your own budget or sometimes the school will have a budget that you can look into, want subsidy or subvention for that. And usually the index is your responsibility. So that can mean that you do it yourself, that can mean that you hire somebody, a grad student, or a friend, or whatever, or it could mean that the press has somebody do it for you, but you have to do that first. So keep that in mind. We'll give you a methodology, version guidelines. Usually they're on the press website as well. Try to follow that as closely as possible. You know, it might not be 100% perfect, but we do appreciate the effort. If you have any questions about it, it's not clear, feel free to ask your editor. Some editors will check it a lot, some will leave you to work. I know that your manuscript isn't coming for a year and you're still writing it, I was gonna move to it. If you have questions, you can always feel free to be. But some editors will be in touch more frequently. Again, ask your editor if you have any questions, especially about structure, format. About for a presentation, communication is key, so just make sure to be in touch with them. Always do a question. And again, let your editor know if you're scheduled for delivery. So especially first-time authors will often have trouble letting their project go. It can be scary because, you know, for a long time you've been revising on your own, and you'll do that for years, and you're revising again, and you keep wondering, like, if it's still at a certain point needs to be done, or else it will never be done. The point of the book is for people to read it, and you have to be able to read it. This from our editorial director is kind of for surgery. No one's going to die remotely. Yeah, so it's important, but don't freak out. Sometimes people freak out over little things like, you know, the book's coming out Thursday instead of Wednesday, and like that's fine, not a big deal. Just try to remember the big picture of it, and have fun and enjoy the process. So when you're thinking about who you want to publish with, try to find somebody that you like, because this could be a multi-year process from the time of submitting to be reviewed to be production to actually coming out. So try to find somebody that you actually want to spend some time with during that time. And that's it. So, simple, unexpected, but we have plenty of time for questions. Good.
Did you do anything in science ed? I mean, we're ed, but
Yeah.
I'll have things in the ed that we do. You said you go to ARA, you don't go to NARS.
No,
Do you go to ICLS?
no. Yeah, we don't really do things like that. I have one book out for you on that.
Well, but the issue is, I mean, I think this is an important point, right? Is that publishers, I mean, if you want your book to be read by people who want to be reading your book, you need to go to a publisher that is in fact marketing to those people. So if most of the people that expect to read the book are SDA or, you know, NARS or SDA attendees, then they're not going to see that book. The chances of them randomly finding it on Google is not that high. So.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And like history of ed is a generally new area for us, but when we decided to publish in that area, we put out an announcement. We have a new series, and we have a series editor and Justice on board. And so people knew that that was an area that we were going into and making an effort in. Right. But if you don't see that from the publisher, then they're already not there. Probably not the right place. Is everybody education here? Or what is it? Yeah.
So recently I keep seeing like Oxford University Press and Princeton University Press, and I wasn't wondering what you clarify that for me. Great, thank you. I'm just a little bit confused on exactly what like publishing class in general. I'm struggling to keep it together.
So the bulk of what we publish is scholarly monographs. So if you revise your dissertation and turn it into a book, that would be the kind of thing that we publish. And so that's more for upper level undergrad or graduate level classes. So it's not going to be their primary text in the book. It's more going to be secondary text, or for people doing research in the field. Right. Right.
And the other thing is though that there's, right, so for example, your dissertation is a very large study and you publish parts of that study as articles in journals.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, you can publish a book that pulls it all together, but I don't know how the rights work because I mean, figures and other kinds of stuff, the journals have rights to those once you.
Yeah, so generally we recommend that the book be no more than, I usually say about 30%. So usually that amounts to like 2 or 3 articles per book. Because if all of the book has come out as articles before, then people, they watch that by the book. If I often especially have access to a subscription that has those articles. As far as rights, so usually if it's your article in your book, you have to let the publisher of the journal article know, and then we'll include something in the book like this version we published as an article in this journal. You do have to get the rights to images or any other permissions that were used to get them specifically for the book. But if it's your own work, it's pretty easy. It gets more complicated if you're publishing an article in like an edited collection. So there's a bunch of different chapters and you aren't necessarily the editor. Then you do have to ask for permission. And so sometimes they charge a fee, sometimes they don't.
I think some people are sort of at a point in their career where they're not quite ready.
You can, so at conferences too, if you're at a conference and you're not necessarily ready to publish a book yet, but you're kind of going down that path and you know you're going to want to publish a book, you can still reach out to an editor, just let them know where you are with the book at that point. And so sometimes, especially if I have extra time, I'm happy to meet with a grad student. Or like I said, I can always arrange a phone call too. And at that point, it's more just gauging interest if this general topic is something the publisher would be interested in, or you can try to kind of tailor it if they have advice like, oh, I really want you to talk about this topic. Try to do that at that point. Yeah, so I usually go to never too early to start thinking about it, because if you're writing your dissertation, obviously it's really important and you should focus on that, but it's a very different thing than a book. So sometimes people will just try to, take their dissertation to say, here, you should publish that. That's not really how it works. So when you're writing your dissertation, try to keep keeping in mind, this is one I'm going to have to revise in the future, I'm going to have to take out a lot of literature review. I tell people, when you're writing the book, you are the expert. We don't need you to prove that you know these things. We assume you know them because you're writing the book. So you don't need to have just a whole history of the field. So take out the lit review that's not relevant. Take out the pointer language. So a lot of dissertations say, I'm going to talk about this. This is what I just spoke about in the chapter. This is what's coming next. That's just really boring. We don't want to do that in the book. So just take that out. And then, like I said before, just keep in mind too when you're writing the dissertation, like, is this the exact topic that I want to write about for the book? Is it general enough to be saleable, or do I need to focus on something more specific because the dissertation not too unwieldy? So even though you should be writing the dissertation the way that your advisors say, so that get your degree, just kind of think about what things you're going to need to change in the future as you're writing it.
With you, so I'm a study friend who, on her road to tenure, collected letters and stories and interviews from all her friends around the road to tenure, and then published. And she published it with Rowan and Littlefield. I don't know, but called "The Road to Tenure: Interviews, Rejections, and Other Humorous Experiences." I mean, that would be something that would. Or this not that kind of like something on the road to a PhD with stories about things. I mean, that seemed a little similar to that first year that you were describing.
And we have similar. So that's another kind of book that we would publish. So that would generally be like a smaller percentage of the list. We're not going to publish all of those, but like we have a book about just like people talking about their experiences as a mother. In the academy, or a father in the academy, or I have a book about Indigenous women or mothers in the academy, and more specific. So people are interested in those kinds of experience books. It's probably going to be a slightly different experience because we might send it out to readers, but it's more like, would you buy this book? Like, what kind of extra topics would you be doing? It's not like, they didn't cite the scholar because that's not my kind of book. So it might be a slightly different experience. But yeah, no, we definitely publish those types of books. Most presses will have a couple what we call trade books on their list. So while most of our education books will be scholarly, we might have a few books that have a wider audience, not as scholarly, but just fun or helpful to read for a lot of people. And in education, you're lucky because if a book is education, so I could take it to film studies conference or sociology or anthropology or women's studies, because even if those people aren't studying education, they are in education because they're professors and PhDs. So just because of their experience, they would be interested in that book. So education kind of has a wider market.
Actually, I want to say I have some questions too. I want to say something to all of you. Some of you are feeling like psychology, which you probably don't want to touch. In fact, in educational psychology, would you agree, Lauren, science is really scientifically eminent.
Yeah.
Most people at some point edit a book, but actually writing a book. Some fields it's not that common, but in other fields, if you don't have a couple of books when you go out for tenure, you're not going to get tenure. Like history is one of those fields. So it's really important to talk to the people in your field to see what the norms are. Even our students will say, think about a book until you're in the so I just wanted to sort of add that to some of your things. And others should be thinking about a book right now. You should already be thinking about how to turn your dissertation, how to craft a dissertation from a book.
Yeah, that's a good point. When I started, I was assisting the film and media studies center, and those people needed a vote to get tenure. It was absolutely essential. Whereas education, it depends on your specific field of education, but sometimes.
So like if you've got 4 disciplines of education as one, education itself is about 12 disciplines. So you've got like 15 disciplines.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have some questions. So one question I have, I'm not judged. I recently with Rutledge completed a book contract with the college. And to be honest, we ended up gritting our teeth and plugging our nose at a couple of items in the contract. We fought with them and got some concessions. We weren't entirely satisfied with the concessions, but it's clear that we wanted to write the book. We were just going to have to agree to it. One of the things that they had originally stipulated, so I think one of the points here is really look at every item really carefully. I mean, the way the item was written is that if they decided they liked the book and wanted another edition, which actually is very likely, but if they decided they did, they had put in the contract that they had a right, if we didn't want to do it, to choose authors. And it wasn't clear that they could basically like maybe modify 20% of our text and have a second edition and they be the authors of the book because we didn't want to do that. So we finally got to the point where they agreed to put in language that we would have to approve the authors if they did that. Satisfied with those done, but we haven't caught that. I mean, again, it's probably not likely, but it's not a good situation to be writing a second edition over to somebody else. I don't care about the second edition. I don't want somebody putting their name on my work and maybe changing it in some substantial way in which it's not clear what they've changed and what hasn't. So there's sort of just intellectual credibility there. So I don't know if there's maybe, I'd be curious to know if you have particular items in your contracts that end up more likely to lead to discussions and decide authors.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't, like I said, I would advise people to read their contract because sometimes people bring stuff.
Yeah, so you read the contract carefully, item by item, word by word.
There's not a ton of back and forth. I feel like they're pretty standard. Something that comes up that we don't do, but a lot of other publishers do, is that they have right of first refusal for your next book. So I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but just something to be aware of, that you could be stuck publishing a book with this publisher and then your next book. So if you don't have a good experience, that might not be a good thing. And you might still want to sign with them because they're a great publisher or well known in your field, whatever, but just something to be aware of and look out for. Yeah, and that's interesting. We don't have the kind of books where we often come out with multiple editions, so that would be in our contract, but that's interesting to do that. Our editorial director and executive editor used to work at Rutledge, so we'll probably know more about that.
So here's another question. So if you don't have science education, let's suppose you did have the science education, so would you deny other students who work in science education someday are thinking about a book? What are the considerations for going to, let's say, Rutgers University Press or another one of the affiliated university presses versus, let's say, not the one that's for-profit publisher like Rutledge?
So, assuming that all the presses publish the kind of books that you want to publish, so something to consider is again, going back to that they actually go to the conferences and advertise places you want to go to, but also for your own purposes of tenure or promotion or whatever, are all of the presses viewed in the same light? So in some fields that we publish in, it's extremely important to people to be published at a university press. In other fields, they don't really care. Or some professors also run into an issue that some schools care, like if you're a Rutgers professor, some people don't want to publish with Rutgers University Press because it looks kind of and so some places don't care about that, or some departments don't care about that, but some departments really do care about that. So these are things that you should be talking about with your colleagues and mentors, what the perception is. And then I'd also just go back to, do you like the person you're talking to? Do you have a good relationship with them? Do they seem to be on top of things? And then also the quality of the book that they put out. So you look at other previous books that they've done. Is this what you want your book to look like? Does it seem to be marketed well? So you can look at past things they've done to see if that's kind of the direction you want to go with your book. So yeah, that's usually the feedback that I found from authors, what they considered when they looked around. And then also to go back to your other point about publishing books. So like you said, definitely do, whatever you have to do for your career, that's most important. But for people who are at a point where they can go articles or book and it doesn't really matter career-wise, I do tell people, there are some things that an article does make more sense. It's a very specific topic or it's a very timely topic you need to turn out really quickly. But a book does allow you to go into a lot more depth than you would with an article. So if there's something where, it's a really big project or you really want to go into a lot of detail about something, you don't feel like an article affords you that, a book is probably something that you should look at in that case. So again, so just because, we publish books, that doesn't necessarily mean they're better, but they are different and they allow you to do different things. So kind of consider when you're crafting the project, what you want to do with the book. So, and again, you can make articles out of that. So those can be a couple of specific topics, and then you use those to craft a larger argument that you would use the book for.
Thank you.